Chief Science Officer Jessica Mitchell rubbed her tired eyes, squinting at the sensor readouts for the fourth time. The electromagnetic storm ahead shouldn't have contained anything interesting. Just another routine survey mission in an unremarkable sector of space. Yet there it was, a massive solid shape within the swirling purple clouds of charged particles. "Computer, recalibrate long-range scanners and rerun analysis," she ordered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The holographic display flickered, then expanded to show the same impossible reading. "Recalibration complete. Analysis confirms. Artificial structure detected. Estimated dimensions: 42.7 kilometers in length, 8.3 kilometers in width, 6.1 kilometers in height." Jessica's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the deck. A ship that size wasn't just unprecedented, it was supposed to be impossible. The largest vessel in the Universal Assembly's fleet barely reached 5 kilometers in length, and that was considered a marvel of engineering. "Captain Torres," she called over the comm, "you need to see this immediately." The captain arrived within minutes, his antennae twitching with concern. As a Centaurian, he prided himself on maintaining a stoic demeanor, but even he couldn't hide his shock at the readings. "Life science?" he asked, mandibles clicking. Jessica's fingers danced across the console. "That's the other impossible thing, sir. Millions of them, all in some form of suspended animation. But the biological markers, they don't match anything in our database." The Starweaver edged closer to the electromagnetic storm, its advanced shields easily handling the particle discharge. As they penetrated the purple haze, the vast shape began to take form on their view screen. The vessel was clearly ancient, its dark hull marked with scars from millennia of micro-impacts. Yet it showed no signs of structural decay. "Look at the design," Jessica breathed, zooming in on a section of the hull. "Those energy conduits, they're channeling power even now. This ship isn't derelict. It's waiting." A sudden alarm blared through the bridge. Jessica's console erupted with warning signals as unknown energy signatures burst from the ancient vessel. "Multiple systems activating," she reported, fingers flying over the controls. "The ship is powering up." "Shields to maximum," Captain Torres ordered. "Prepare tow." He never finished the command. A pulse of invisible energy washed over the Starweaver, and every system went dark simultaneously. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow across the bridge as they drifted, powerless. Jessica felt a tingling sensation across her skin. Looking down, she saw particles of light dancing around her body. "Captain," she called out in alarm, but the teleportation field had already taken hold. She rematerialized in a vast, dimly lit chamber. The air was stale but breathable, and the artificial gravity slightly stronger than she was used to. Around her, rows of hibernation pods stretched into the darkness, each containing a humanoid figure. Approaching the nearest pod, Jessica wiped away centuries of dust from its small display window. The face within was serene, almost peaceful, and surprisingly similar to her own species. The main differences were the lack of secondary breathing organs and the presence of what appeared to be decorative head fur. A holographic interface suddenly sparked to life beside her, projecting text in an unknown language. As she watched, the characters shifted and reformed into Universal Standard. "DNA CAN complete. Species ID into HFY. Human. Genetic QMPATIBII. To Y. 99.8%. Emergency protocol activated." The chamber hummed with awakening power, and Jessica realized with a start that she hadn't just discovered an ancient vessel. She had triggered something. Around her, status lights on the hibernation pods began changing from deep blue to bright green. The humans were waking up, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Thomas Reed's hologram flickered before the Universal Assembly's Emergency Council, his weathered face illuminated by the harsh lights of 100 alien transmission pods. The council chamber, normally a model of order and decorum, had descended into chaos. "You've lost an entire survey vessel," High Counselor Zixtal demanded, her crystalline form pulsing with angry red light. "And you propose we do nothing." "Not nothing, Counselor," Reed replied, keeping his voice steady. "I propose we act with caution. The Starweaver's last transmission contained data unlike anything we've seen. This vessel, this human vessel, represents technology centuries beyond our own. Precisely why it must be destroyed." The Martian delegate's environmental suit hissed as he stood. "We've all seen the analysis. A ship that size could house enough warriors to conquer half the Assembly's worlds." Reed pulled up the sensor data Jessica Mitchell had transmitted before her disappearance. The massive ship rotated slowly in the holographic display, its scale making even the council chamber feel small. "Dr. Emily Cooper," Reed gestured to the scientist beside him, "has made a discovery that changes everything." Emily stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she accessed her datapad. At 32, she was young for a xenorchaeologist, but her reputation for brilliant analysis had earned her this moment. "Distinguished Council," she began, "what I'm about to show you proves we've been deceived for centuries." She projected a new image, a planet most had dismissed long ago. "This is Earth, allegedly destroyed in a natural catastrophe. But look at these readings." The display shifted, showing complex waveforms. "These are quantum encryption patterns, far more sophisticated than anything we use. They've been emanating from Earth for at least 300 years, disguised as background radiation. Someone didn't want us finding Earth, or its people." The chamber erupted again, but a new voice cut through the chaos. "The question is who?" Supreme Chancellor Vorn had been silent until now, his ancient reptilian features unreadable. "Who has the power to hide an entire civilization from us?" Before anyone could respond, every screen in the chamber flashed red. Emergency protocols engaged as a new signal broke through their secured channels. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jack Harrison of the Earth vessel Exodus." The voice was calm, professional, and completely alien to most present. "We have your survey ship and its crew. They are unharmed. We request immediate diplomatic contact with your highest authority." Reed felt his heart race. First contact was happening faster than anyone had planned, but the next words froze the entire chamber. "Be advised, any hostile action toward our vessel will be considered an act of war. We've detected your weapons platforms powering up. You have 5 minutes to stand them down. We developed countermeasures to such weapons centuries ago." Emily's console beeped urgently. "Ambassador," she whispered, "they just scanned our entire defense network. In seconds, through our best encryption." Reed stepped forward again, knowing the next few moments could determine the fate of galactic civilization. "This is Ambassador Thomas Reed. On behalf of the Universal Assembly, I welcome." "Reed," Harrison's voice carried surprise. "Thomas Reed. That's a human name." The ambassador took a deep breath. "Yes, my ancestors were part of an expedition that vanished 3 centuries ago. We thought we were the only survivors of whatever happened to Earth." Silence filled the chamber. Then, "Stand by for visual transmission." The hologram shifted, showing a tall man in a dark uniform. Behind him, Jessica Mitchell stood unharmed, engaged in animated discussion with other humans in similar attire. "Ambassador Reed." Harrison's expression softened slightly. "It seems we have much to discuss, starting with why our long-lost cousins are working for the very organization that's been trying to prevent humanity's expansion into space for the past 5 centuries. The council chamber exploded into pandemonium. Reed met Emily's wide-eyed stare, both realizing the same thing. This wasn't just first contact. This was the beginning of a revelation that would shake the foundations of the Universal Assembly itself. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harrison's first breath in 300 years tasted like metal and ozone. The revival process had been faster than the simulations, an emergency protocol he'd never expected to use. His muscles responded instantly, enhanced by the nanomediators flooding his system. "Status report," he croaked, pulling himself from the hibernation pod. Around him, other pods were activating in carefully calculated sequences. "Special Operations Team Alpha. Awakening complete." The ship's A responded. "Beta through Delta processing now." Warning: unknown entities attempting to access Command Center through Maintenance Shaft 42B. Harrison's combat implants activated, feeding tactical data directly into his consciousness. 32 Special Operations officers were already awake, their vital signs strong. The intruders, 3 of them, were using advanced cutting tools on the blast doors. "Team, form up on me," he subvocalized through the neural network. "Non-lethal protocols until we assess the situation. Rodriguez, get me eyes on the bridge." Captain Maria Rodriguez's acknowledgement came instantly. "Sir, accessing security feeds. The alien vessel is secured in our forward bay. Their crew appears to be cooperating with Dr. Mitchell." Harrison paused. "Who?" "One of them." "Sir, well, she looks human. But her genetic profile shows subtle differences. 300 years of isolated evolution, maybe." The maintenance shaft's blast doors began to glow red. Harrison positioned his team, their combat suits automatically adjusting to the low light. The nanofiber armor felt like a second skin, its reactive surface ready to deflect energy weapons or harden against kinetic impacts. "Remember," he warned, "we're likely dealing with a civilization that never experienced the Terminus War. They won't understand what they're walking into." The doors fell inward with a crash. 3 figures in sleek environmental suits rushed through, carrying what Harrison's systems identified as plasma cutters. His team's response was instant and overwhelming. Gravity plates reversed locally, sending the intruders floating helplessly. Targeted EMP bursts disabled their equipment. Within seconds, all 3 were secured, their weapons collected by Harrison's efficiently moving squad. "Command Center secured," he reported. "Now, let's see who our guests are." Carefully, they removed the lead intruder's helmet. The alien inside looked almost human, save for the bioluminescent patterns across its skin and the slightly larger eyes. It spoke, its translation device still functioning. "Impossible," it gasped. "Your response time, your technology. You were in hibernation." Harrison smiled grimly. "Combat reflexes are hardwired, friend. Now, why don't you explain why you're trying to breach a military vessel's command center?" Before the alien could respond, Rodriguez's voice cut in. "Sir, you need to see this. The assembly. They're mobilizing a fleet. And sir, they got ships of human design." Harrison's blood ran cold. He turned to the captured alien. "Those ships, where did you get them?" "Ask your ambassador Reed," the alien spat. "Ask him what really happened to the lost expeditions. Ask him why Earth was declared dead to the galaxy." A new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Jessica Mitchell patched through from the observation deck. "Commander Harrison, I can explain some of this. I'm one of them. A descendant of the lost Cambridge expedition. We thought Earth was destroyed. But clearly," she paused, "we were lied to. For generations." Harrison made a decision. "Rodriguez, begin awakening the civilian sections. Dr. Mitchell, I want you in the command center. And get me a direct line to this Ambassador Reed." He turned to his team. "The rest of you, prepare for potential hostile contact. If there are humans out there working against us, they had 300 years to prepare. But so have we." The ship hummed with increasing power as more systems came online. In hibernation pods throughout the massive vessel, millions of humans began the awakening process. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and civilians, the best Earth had to offer, preserved through centuries of sleep. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, "incoming transmission from Ambassador Reed." Harrison straightened his uniform, preparing to face a descendant of the humans who'd chosen a different path. Put him through. It's time we learned what happened to our lost brothers and sisters, and why someone wanted humanity to stay asleep. Security Director Michael Reynolds stood before the assembly delegation, his weathered face betraying no emotion as the aliens examined the primitive weapon in his hands. The demonstration chamber, specially prepared for this first official meeting, hummed with whispered conversations in a dozen different languages. "This," he announced, holding up what looked like a simple handheld device, "is what we considered a standard-issue defensive tool. 300 years ago, before we went to sleep." Ambassador Reed shifted uncomfortably. He knew what was coming. "Your security scan classified it as a low-threat personal defense unit," Reynolds continued. "Would anyone like to guess why we found that amusing?" High Counselor Zixel's crystalline form vibrated with disdain. "Primitive molecular disruption technology. We abandoned such crude tools centuries ago in favor of." The wall behind her disappeared. Not exploded, not melted, simply ceased to exist. A perfect 10-foot circle of supposedly indestructible assembly metal had been erased from reality, leaving a view of the stars beyond, held back only by the chamber's energy shields. Silence fell like a hammer. "That," Reynolds said quietly, "was at 2% power. We developed this crude tool as a mining implement for children's education programs." Dr. Amanda Walker stepped forward before panic could set in. The ship's chief historical officer had spent the last hours reviewing the assembly's technological development records, and what she'd found had left her cold. "Distinguished delegates," she began, her voice steady, "you're not asking the right question. You shouldn't be asking how our technology works. You should be asking why we chose to leave Earth when we were clearly more advanced than any current civilization in the assembly." She gestured, and holographic images filled the chamber. Earth cities that dwarfed anything the assembly had built. Machines that bent reality itself. Achievements that the assembly had deemed theoretically impossible. "We didn't flee because we were weak," Walker continued. "We fled because we were too strong. Because we had pushed the boundaries of science so far that we began to tear holes in the fabric of space-time itself." The images shifted to show massive rifts in reality, tears in the universe that threatened to devour entire continents. The assembly delegates watched in horror as human machines desperately fought to contain the damage. "The Terminus War wasn't fought against an enemy," Walker revealed. "It was fought against our own hubris, against the consequences of pushing too far, too fast. We had to choose. Either scale back our technological development dramatically, or risk destroying not just Earth, but potentially the entire galaxy." Reynolds placed the weapon carefully on a nearby table. "Some of us chose to sleep, to preserve our knowledge until we found a way to use it safely. Others, it seems," he glanced at Reed, "chose to abandon our technology entirely and integrate with less advanced civilizations." Ambassador Reed stood, his face pale. "We didn't just integrate," he admitted. "We were supposed to guide them, to help prevent other civilizations from making our mistakes. But somewhere along the way, our mission was corrupted. The Assembly's leadership began suppressing technological advancement instead of guiding it safely. And now," Walker concluded, "you face a choice. The knowledge we carry could transform your civilization overnight, but it could also destroy you, just as it nearly destroyed us. The question is, are you ready to learn from our mistakes?" Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos. "Multiple ships just appeared out of quantum space. They're using human quantum drive signatures." Reynolds and Walker exchanged looks of shock. Only Earth's most advanced ships had mastered quantum space travel. If there were others out there using that technology. "Attention, unknown vessels," Harrison's voice echoed through the chamber. "This is the Earth ship Exodus. You are using restricted human technology. Identify yourselves immediately." The response came in perfect ancient Earth standard. "Exodus, this is the Guardian Fleet. By authority of the Earth Preservation Directive, you are ordered to stand down. The sleepers were never meant to wake. The chamber erupted in chaos as both humans and aliens realized the same thing. This wasn't just a reunion of lost civilization. This was about to become a war between different visions of humanity's future, and the assembly was caught in the middle. Colonel Ryan Anderson stood on the bridge of the Exodus, watching the holographic display with growing concern. A rogue black hole, barely the size of a pinhead, was tearing through the Centaurian colony world's defenses like they were tissue paper. The assembly's most advanced ships hung helplessly in orbit, their weapons useless against the fundamental force of gravity itself. "Time to impact?" he asked, already pulling on his quantum interface gloves. 4 minutes until it hits the planetary core, Jessica Mitchell replied, her fingers dancing across the sensor controls. "The assembly's evacuation is only 40% complete. We're looking at millions of casualties." Anderson nodded grimly. "Harrison, give me control of the primary gravity arrays. Those systems weren't meant to be used while we're still recovering from hibernation." Harrison mourned over the comm. "The power drained cold. Could wake more sleepers early, I know. Better than watching a planet die." The quantum interface activated, connecting Anderson's consciousness directly to the ship's gravity manipulation systems. To the assembly observers on the bridge, it looked like he was merely moving his hands through the air. In reality, he was reaching out to grasp the fabric of space-time itself. "My God," Catherine Hayes whispered from her diplomatic station. "He's actually going to try it." The rogue black hole's gravitational pull suddenly met resistance. Anderson's movements became more precise, his enhanced mind calculating gravitational vectors that assembly supercomputers couldn't even model. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he began to redirect the black hole's course. 17 species just opened diplomatic channels, Hayes reported, her console lighting up like a Christmas tree. "They're all offering exclusive technology exchange treaties." Anderson barely heard her. The black hole was fighting him, its enormous mass trying to tear free of his control. Then he smiled. "Watch this," he said, and made a simple twisting gesture. The black hole vanished. Jessica's sensors went wild. You created a closed temporal loop. The black hole is feeding into itself." "Basic gravity manipulation," Anderson said, removing his gloves. "We taught this in high school physics. Well, before the Terminus War, anyway." The celebration was cut short by Harrison's voice. "Security breach detected. Multiple infiltration points. They're using phase technology similar to ours." Anderson spun to face Hayes. "I thought you had the assembly diplomats contained." "These aren't assembly agents," she replied, checking her security feeds. "The energy signatures, they're human. The Guardian fleet must have smuggled infiltrators aboard during the chaos." Deep within the ship, alarms blared as shadow figures moved through walls, their phase suits allowing them to bypass physical barriers. But they hadn't counted on the Exodus's internal defenses being specifically designed to counter such technology. "Quantum lockdown initiated," the ship's AI announced. "Phase oscillation normalized. Intruders solidifying in sectors 7, 12, and 18. Anderson watched on the security feeds as the infiltrators suddenly found themselves solid again and surrounded by very angry special operations teams. The fight was brief but illuminating. "Sir," Jessica called out, "you need to see this. One of the infiltrators, their genetic profile shows signs of extensive modification, beyond anything in our database. They've been evolving their technology while we slept." Harrison's voice was grim. "The question is, why didn't they want us to wake up?" The answer came in the form of a transmission that broke through every channel simultaneously. A woman's face appeared on the main screen, her features eerily perfect, the result of centuries of genetic engineering. "This is Admiral Sarah Morrison of the Guardian Fleet. You've forced our hand, Exodus. We've spent 300 years protecting humanity from itself, keeping our worst impulses in check. We won't let you undo everything we've built." Anderson met Hayes' worried gaze. "Get me the Assembly Council," he ordered. They need to know what they're really dealing with. This isn't about technology anymore. It's about the very future of human evolution. Behind him, the contained black hole continued its eternal dance, a testament to the power that humanity had learned to control and the responsibility that came with it. Marine Captain David Rogers had seen a lot in his years of service before the deep sleep, but nothing had prepared him for this. Earth, supposed to be a wasteland, filled the view screen of his dropship with vibrant blues and greens. Massive energy shields shimmered like soap bubbles in the atmosphere, their complexity far beyond anything the assembly had achieved. Those barriers shouldn't exist, Jessica Mitchell murmured beside him. The energy requirements alone would be impossible. Rogers smiled. Scenes were finding a lot of impossible things lately. Their ship passed through the shield layers like they weren't even there. Rogers checked his tactical display. The joint expedition fleet following them consisted of 3 assembly vessels and 2 Guardian fleet ships, all keeping a respectful distance. Surface installation detected, their pilot announced. Getting a signal. They're giving us landing coordinates. The installation turned out to be a sprawling complex of crystal and light, seamlessly integrated into a restored natural landscape. As they touched down, Rogers noticed something odd about the trees surrounding the landing pad. They're processing atmospheric carbon, Jessica confirmed, checking her sensors. The entire biosphere has been engineered at the molecular level. A delegation awaited them, led by a tall woman in a white uniform that seemed to shift colors as she moved. "Welcome home," she said, smiling. "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Surface Restoration Director. We've been expecting you for about 3 centuries now." Rogers tensed. "Morrison? Any relation to Admiral Sarah Morrison? My twin sister, actually, though we've disagreed on quite a few things over the generations." She gestured to the complex behind her. "Shall we discuss why your ship was really built?" Inside, they found a command center that made assembly technology look primitive. Holographic displays showed real-time data from across the solar system and beyond. The sleeper ship program wasn't just about preservation, Elizabeth explained, bringing up historical data. It was bait. We knew someone was sabotaging our attempts to expand beyond Earth. Every colony ship we sent out either disappeared or was destroyed. The assembly, Jessica started, but Elizabeth shook her head. Not exactly. There was a faction within early human space exploration that believed our expansion would inevitably lead to another terminus war. They infiltrated the assembly in its early days, steering its development away from anything that might let them discover Earth's true state. Rogers watched the tactical displays, noting the defense systems that made Earth essentially impregnable. "And your sister leads this faction now." "The Guardians, yes. They believe humanity needs to be contained, controlled. She gestured to their surroundings, believe in responsible progress. Everything you see here was built using the same technologies that nearly destroyed us, but with safeguards, limits, understanding." "Why now?" Jessica asked. "Why let us find the Exodus after all this time?" Elizabeth's expression darkened. "Because something's coming. Something that will require humanity to be united, not divided. Our long-range sensors detected it decades ago. A threat that makes the Terminus War look like a playground scuffle." She brought up a new hologram, showing what looked like a tear in space itself, slowly expanding. "The universe is breaking. And this time, it's not our fault. We need the Exodus crew's fresh perspective, untainted by centuries of political maneuvering. And we need the Assembly's combined resources." Rogers stared at the dimensional rift. "Does your sister know about this?" "She thinks sealing Earth away will protect us. She's wrong." Elizabeth turned to face them fully. The Exodus wasn't just an escape plan. It was a preservation of humanity's greatest minds, stored until they were needed most. That time is now. Their discussion was interrupted by an alert. The Guardian fleet ships in orbit had opened fire on the assembly vessels. "And so it begins," Elizabeth sighed. "My sister never could wait for diplomacy." She pressed a control, and the orbital shields shifted. Both Guardian and assembly ships found themselves gently but firmly pushed apart by fields of pure gravitational force. "Now then," she said, turning back to her stunned visitors, "shall we discuss how to save the galaxy?" Engineering Chief Kevin Parker hadn't slept in 48 hours, but the nanites in his system kept him sharp as he worked. The assembly science team watching him looked like they were witnessing a religious miracle, which, in a way, they were. "The quantum harmonics need to be perfectly aligned," he explained, manipulating the holographic interface with practiced ease. "Otherwise, you'll tear a hole in space-time instead of just peeking through it." An alarm blared through the lab. Jessica Mitchell burst through the door, her face pale. "We've got trouble. Someone just tried to access the Exodus's weapons database. They got through 15 layers of quantum encryption in seconds." Parker's hands froze above the controls. "That's not possible. Unless..." He brought up a new display, lines of code streaming past faster than the assembly scientists could follow. "They're using our own algorithms against us. Modified, evolved over centuries." "The Guardians?" Jessica asked. "No," Parker's expression hardened. "This is different. The coding structure, it's like looking in a dark mirror. This is our tech, but pushed in directions we specifically avoided because of the risks." The holographic display suddenly flickered, resolving into a face that made Jessica gasp. It was her own face, or rather, her face as it might have looked if subjected to centuries of genetic enhancement. "Hello, ancestors." The duplicate Jessica smiled. "I am Operative Mitchell 7, descendant of your original survey officer. I've been authorized to offer you a choice." Parker's fingers flew across the controls, trying to trace the signal. The duplicate noticed and her smile widened. "Don't bother, Chief Parker. You're still thinking in linear quantum space. We've moved beyond such limitations." She gestured, and every piece of technology in the lab activated simultaneously. "Join us. Share your pure, unaltered perspective. Help us push beyond the artificial constraints that have held humanity back." "Artificial constraints?" Parker laughed bitterly. "You mean the safety protocols that prevent us from ripping reality apart." "Reality is already being torn apart," Mitchell 7 countered. "But instead of facing it head-on with everything we have, we're divided. The Guardians want to hide, Earth wants to play it safe, and you're still clinging to 300-year-old restrictions." Jessica stepped forward. "If you're really my descendant, you know why those restrictions exist. We saw what unfettered progress led to. We saw weakness." Mitchell 7 snapped. "The Terminus War wasn't a failure. It was a preview of our true potential. The Assembly has been holding humanity back, and the Guardians are their willing accomplices." Parker had heard enough. With a series of precise gestures, he initiated a program he'd hoped never to use. The lab's quantum field inverted, trapping the transmission in a closed loop. "That won't hold me for long," Mitchell 7 warned, her image starting to distort. "Long enough," Parker replied. He turned to the assembly scientists. "Everything you just saw, forget it. All of it. Because if what I suspect is true, we're dealing with something far worse than the Guardians." Jessica's eyes widened. A third faction. One that didn't try to protect humanity or contain it. One that embraced the destruction, Parker finished. "They must have split off before the Exodus launched. Spent centuries developing in secret, pushing the boundaries we specifically created to prevent another Terminus event." The holographic image of Mitchell 7 flickered one last time. "See you soon, ancestors. Evolution cannot be stopped." As the transmission died, every screen in the lab displayed the same warning. Quantum breaches detected in multiple sectors of known space. The dimensional tear Elizabeth Morrison had shown them wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was deliberate. "Get me aligned to Earth," Parker ordered. "And wake up the rest of the engineering division. All of them." He looked at the assembly scientists, their faces showing a mix of fear and awe. "Class is in session, gentlemen. Time to learn why humanity chose to sleep rather than face what we become. Behind them, the quantum harmonics device hummed softly, its perfect alignment a reminder of the thin line between progress and destruction, a line some had chosen to cross. Captain Sarah Anderson stood on the Exodus's bridge, watching as reality itself seemed to tear apart before them. The dimensional rifts had multiplied, their purple-black tendrils reaching across space like hungry fingers. Behind her, the combined fleet of Assembly, Guardian, and Earth forces held position. Former enemies united against a greater threat. Mitchell 7's forces detected. Harrison reported, his voice tense. There, God Almighty, they're using the rifts as weapons. Ships emerged from the tiers in spacetime. Twisted versions of human vessel designs. Their hulls rippled with quantum distortions, breaking every law of physics the Assembly had ever documented. They're not just using the rifts. Kevin Parker's voice came through the comm. They're becoming one with them. The crew, they've merged with their technology. Sarah watched as one of the enemy ships literally phased through an Assembly cruiser, leaving it frozen in quantum stasis. Tell me you have something, Parker. We do, Elizabeth Morrison replied instead, her transmission coming from Earth's command center. But you're not going to like it. The plan was insane. Use the Exodus's gravity drives, Earth's planetary shields, and the Guardian fleet's evolved technology to create a quantum resonance field. In theory, it would forcibly realign local spacetime, sealing the rifts and trapping Mitchell 7's forces in normal space. In practice, it meant trusting their former enemies and risking the same kind of cascade failure that had triggered the Terminus War. If we don't do this perfectly, Admiral Sarah Morrison warned from her Guardian flagship, we'll trigger a quantum collapse that will make the Terminus War look like a firecracker. That's why we're all here, Sarah Anderson replied. Earth's experience, Guardian precision, Assembly resources, and the Exodus's raw power. Together. Mitchell 7's voice cut through their communications. How poetic. The divided children of Earth, united at last. But you still don't understand. We're not trying to destroy reality. We're trying to transcend it. The enemy fleet surged forward. Assembly ships fell back under the onslaught, their most advanced weapons useless against vessels that could simply step sideways out of existence. Now, Anderson ordered. The Exodus's gravity drives roared to life, their power amplified by Earth's planetary shields. Guardian ships moved in perfect formation, their evolved technology synchronizing with the quantum field. Assembly vessels added their energy to the mix, following the precise calculations Parker had taught them. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. You can't stop evolution, Mitchell 7 taunted, as her flagship phased between dimensions. We're not trying to stop it, Anderson replied. We're trying to guide it, like we always should have. The quantum resonance field activated. Reality snapped back into proper alignment with an audible crack. Mitchell 7's ships, caught between dimensions, were forced back into normal space. Parker, Anderson shouted, hit them with the gravity pulse now. The combined human fleets fired as one. Not with weapons, but with concentrated fields of gravitational force. Mitchell 7's vessels, their trans-dimensional technology suddenly useless, found themselves trapped in bubbles of localized spacetime. Impossible. Mitchell 7's voice shook. The power requirements for this kind of coordination are exactly why we created the safety protocols, Elizabeth Morrison finished. Not to limit us, but to teach us how to work together. Evolution isn't about individual power, it's about collective growth. The battle ended not with destruction, but with containment. Mitchell 7's fleet, trapped in quantum stasis fields, would be studied and perhaps, one day, rehabilitated. In the aftermath, as Assembly, Guardian, and Earth representatives gathered on the Exodus, Sarah Anderson watched Kevin Parker teach a group of mixed-species scientists the basics of safe quantum manipulation. The human factor, Jessica Mitchell mused beside her. Turns out it wasn't about our technology or our potential for destruction. Anderson nodded. It was about our capacity to learn from our mistakes, to choose cooperation over dominance. Beyond the viewports, the first joint assembly human research vessels were already exploring the stabilized rifts, seeking understanding rather than power. The sleeping behemoth hadn't just awakened, it had helped the galaxy itself evolve. Ready to make history? Harrison asked, joining them. Anderson smiled. We already have. Now it's time to make the future.